Good morning, everybody. I am excited to give this presentation. It's a little bit different than what we usually hear at the Arboretum, so I like that. I like being a little bit of an oddball. As I read the Arboretum mission, it's to introduce, display, and promote plants that diversify the American landscape. So in many ways, what the Arboretum does is different than what we see in the woodlands, but I'm going to show you that it's not exactly separate and different. And one of the things that I also wanted to do, well, let me get to that in a minute. Let me show you this first quote. We have a cat that just jumped on the table. She may make an appearance. I love this quote, "A walk in nature walks the soul back home." So I think there's a lot of restorative work that can be done in a forest and in nature. So that's one of the reasons that I encourage you to go out and take a walk in the woods. But here's some other reasons why to go out. It's pretty simple to do. Throw on a pair of good shoes, grab a water bottle, maybe a hat. Might need some insect repellent, but you just go and walk, and you walk at your own pace. You do your own thing. The woods can be a really quiet place, and I think we can all agree that we live with a lot of noise, not just audio noise, but noise on our phones and, mail and people and stuff, traffic. So the woods are a nice respite from that. It's smart because when you're out in the woods, you're thinking about where you're walking and how you're walking and what you see. So you're using all of your body, especially your brain. We all know that walking is healthy. So being outdoors and smelling fresh air and being around nature is, like I said, restorative and healthy. And pretty much anybody can do it. There are even a lot of hiking trails that are made for the disabled. So different abilities can get out there. People with different abilities can get out there and take a walk. But one of the things that really brought it home for me to do this talk was an article that I read. It was an interview with Doug Tallamy, and he's an entomologist and wildlife ecologist that teaches at the University of Delaware. And he's written a number of books, and a couple of the titles are Bringing Nature Home and The Living Landscape. So that tells you his point of view. And in this article, he said, if we could get people to see their property, that means your own landscape, as more than a decoration and as a vital part of their local ecosystem, that is a key to get them to join into the ecosystem function instead of destroying it. And I love that for us to think about our own landscapes as being part of a really vital ecosystem, I think is one of the things that we should keep in mind as we're designing and planting and helping our plants thrive, that it's not natural for the humans to be in one place and so-called nature being in another. It's actually should be a blend of the two. So I hope that this talk will inspire you to add some of the native plants that we can find in the woodlands that also grow in our landscapes, to add those in, but also to get out and just walk and see. So the walk that I took that this talk is based on was out at Hemlock Bluffs Nature Preserve in Cary. I live in Cary, and so this is a pretty convenient place to go. And interestingly enough, Hemlock Bluffs is actually a joint project between the town of Cary and the state of North Carolina. It's about 140 acres, and the state owns the bulk of that, about 97 acres. And that's the Hemlock Bluffs State Natural Area. But then the town of Cary owns another 42 acres, which is called the Stevens Nature Center. And one of the interesting things about the land is it preserves a population of eastern hemlock trees and other vegetation that we typically find in the western part of the state, in the Appalachian Mountains. But the tall north-facing bluffs of Swift Creek provide similar conditions to the mountains, and they've allowed these plant communities to survive there, actually going back to the last ice age. So this is some ancient land that we're talking about. So let's get started and see some of the things that I saw. Now, one of the park rangers took us on this hike, and I was taking notes and taking pictures. I didn't use all of my pictures because they're not quite as good as some that I found in the NCSU plant toolbox plant database. So here we go. This is one of the first things we saw, a Christmas fern, and it is found it's an evergreen fern, which is nice. It stays green throughout the year, and we find it growing in rich, rocky woods along stream banks and swamps and thickets. And it grows to about 2 or 3 feet in height, and it's got this fountain-like form. And the leaves here are actually called fronds, and they have many leaflets that grow directly from the ground into a clump. It doesn't have any flowers, but it does have black spores on the underside of the leaf. Not all of these leaves, these fronds, are fertile, but the ones that are get narrower at the top. And in the spring, you get these fiddle heads, and it actually is curled and looks like a fiddle head, the end of a fiddle. And those are new leaves, and they come out in the spring, and they're silvery in color, really pretty. And I also want to give another shout out about the fern propagation class, because I would imagine that some of these natives are going to be part of that class. The second fern that we saw was the southern lady fern, and there are a number of lady ferns, and that refers to their reproductive structure. It's concealed in a really inconspicuous place on the frond, so that's considered female. And it's also considered feminine because of its elegant and graceful appearance. They grow to be about 2 to 3 feet high, and they have lacy, broad, deciduous leaves. And it's native in eastern U.S. along swamps, streams, and riverbanks. And you'll notice a continual theme of moist soil for most of these ferns. Now, you can grow it at home if it's given the right conditions. It has really light green fronds and a reddish stem, and it makes a really pretty carpet in the forest, and it could be in your home landscape as well. We next came upon the Jack-in-the-Pulpit. This is a native plant that's in spring woodland, and it grows about 1 to 2 feet high, and the spadix or the jack has a columnar form with a sheath that's called the spathe or the pulpit, and that's what you see there on the left. And they initially produce only male flowers, but they become hermaphroditic as they age. It has the male flowers at the top of the spadix and the female at the bottom. And then as they mature, the flowering plant will produce a cluster of red berries, and that's what you see on the right. And those happen in mid to late summer, and they become visible as the spathe withers and goes away. And that's what we saw, the red berries there on the right. This plant is not one you want to eat. The roots contain calcium oxalate, so they're very poisonous, and the leaves and seeds will produce a burning sensation when ingested. And one of the things that I thought was interesting that the ranger said was a lot of plants that have berries that are have a burning sensation, have some toxicity to them. As they mature and get older, that fades, and that's when animals can eat them, which I thought was interesting. I didn't know. And this really unique plant is pollinated by flies and gnats. They crawl beneath the spathe and down into the spadix to collect the pollen. And it's a plant that can start out male and spontaneously change to female the next year and vice versa. So I think that's pretty interesting as well. So Jack-in-the-Pulpit. Another fern that we saw was the sensitive fern, and it gets its name because it also likes a lot of moisture, and it's sensitive to drought, but it's also sensitive to frost. So I would imagine that these ferns, with the cold snap that we had last week, that they are one of the first plants to become damaged from cold weather. So that's where it gets its name. It's got somewhat coarse look to it, the leaves, the fronds. It's shorter than some. Actually, it can grow up to 4 feet tall, but it's The fertile fronds are shorter. They're about 12 inches long, and they're typically brown in late summer and will stay there for the rest of the winter. So you can see those in the picture on the left, the brown fertile fronds. And again, we're going to find those in a wet area. This is called a royal fern, and they're a tall fern as well. They can actually grow up to 6 feet tall, typically 5 to 6 feet. And again, on moist bluffs and ledges and along streams, they've actually been found growing in water, though typically that's not where they're always going to grow. Their fronds turn a golden yellow to brown in autumn. And the spores are located on the ends of the tips of the fronds, and they're a brown tassel-like cluster. So sometimes this is called a flowering fern because of those clusters that are at the end. And an interesting thing about this fern is the roots are used as fibers for potting orchids. Although why you'd want to uproot and kill this beautiful fern, I don't know. Again, wet soil, partial shade. It wants moist, rich, humus, acidic soils, but it can adapt to lesser conditions. And it will not grow well in full sun. So that's another theme with ferns. Most of them do want at least partial shade. And again, they have those golden clusters of spores in late summer. This one is called a cinnamon fern, and it's, again, a native fern that wants moist, boggy ground along streams or shaded ledges or bluffs, and it grows in clumps 2 to 3 feet tall. But if it has the right moisture, a lot of moisture, it can grow up to 6 feet tall. And it also has these separate spore-bearing, stiff, fertile fronds that appear in early spring and turn brown. So you can see those right in the center of this cinnamon fern. And it gets its name because of these cinnamon-colored fibers that are found near the frond bases. And it's also used, the roots are used for potting for orchids. Again, we can grow these. They want medium to wet soils and partial shade. And if the ground is too dry, they can go dormant. They take a while to establish themselves, but once they do, they're very long-lived. So a nice addition to a shady spot in your yard. This one is wild ginger. This is one that I have growing wild in my yard, in my wooded area. It's noted for its heart-shaped leaves, and the leaves can be lots of different colors of green, often a dark green, shiny leaf, sometimes with a mottled cream color in there. It does have little small flowers. They're jug-shaped, and they lie on the ground. And because of that, ants and ground beetles pollinate these. They like rich soils that are moist as well, and does really well in the shade. And sometimes they struggle a bit with our really hot, humid summers. But like I said, I do have them growing naturally in my area, and they don't seem to be too bothered by our hot and our humid that we have so much of in the summer. And the leaves and the roots smell like ginger when they're crushed, but this is not related to culinary ginger, completely different. It is deciduous, so you're not going to see the leaves in the winter. Another fern, lots and lots of ferns here. This is called the netted chain fern, and it's a deciduous fern that's found in North America, again, in wet soil that's acidic and organic, often in woodland bogs and swamps. And it's similar to the sensitive fern that we saw earlier, but this one can grow much taller, up to 4 feet. So this is a big fern as well. We can grow it in our gardens in part shade to full shade. Again, it wants really rich organic soil, but it will do okay in average garden soil and take some sun as long as it stays moist. Again, moisture is really key to most of these ferns. It spreads by branching and creeping rhizomes. So it's a fern that will naturalize, but actually can be considered weedy because it naturalizes too well in some cases. This is a not a fern. We found horse nettle in the woods, and something to remember about this is that it's highly poisonous. So do not ingest this plant, horse nettle. And some of the other common names for it are apple of Sodom, devil's potato, or devil's tomato. So I think those names make it clear that this is a plant that you do not want to eat. It's actually considered a perennial herb, and it's grown in warm season, and it grows tall and erect and sprawls and spreads by both rhizomes and seeds. It can grow up to 4 feet tall, and it has prickles on both the leaves and the stems. I don't think you can see those in this picture, but you can see the light violet or white star-shaped flowers that are there on the plant, and they appear in summer and fall. And it has fruit on it that are green, they're berries, and they actually look like little tomatoes. So that's probably why it has that name, devil's tomato. It's a member of the nightshade family, so it is related to tomatoes and potatoes, eggplants, and peppers. And we can find this all over the US and Canada and Mexico, and it's considered a noxious weed in many places. And I think with all of those attributes, that would definitely fit under the category of noxious. Joe pieweed, this is a great plant. It's a native herbaceous perennial, and it's found usually in moist ground in meadows, woods, and fields. And it grows erect and in clumps and can get super tall, 4 to 7 feet. So if you're going to use it in your yard, which I highly recommend because of some of the properties I'll tell you about later in just a minute. But it is going to grow really tall, so it needs to be in the back and maybe an accent part of your garden. It also wants damp, moist to wet, rich soils. But if it has enough moisture, it can tolerate less ideal soils. It prefers full sun, will take some partial shade, and it wants neutral to slightly acidic soils. It's these are some of the properties that make it such a great plant in the landscape. It's pretty resistant to damage from deers, and the flowers are attracted to all sorts of pollinators. Bees and butterflies all love this plant. And then the seeds feed our songbirds. So it's a really a workhorse of a plant. And again, it's native, so it's going to be food for all sorts of native wildlife. It's a wonderful plant for attracting the butterflies. And if you do have this, you cut it back in late winter, and you can divide the plant when it goes dormant and share it or move it around. But in the spring, just as the shoots appear, you can also still divide it before it started growing profusely. Now we're going to move on to some of the lichen and the fungi that we found. And most of these slides are in the order that we saw them as we walked around Hemlock Bluffs, so I didn't categorize them completely. But here we see lichen growing on a tree, and they grow on all sorts of surfaces. And it's often a question that we get, is this hurting my tree? Is it going to kill my tree? And the answer to both of those is no, it's not hurting anything. It's not going to kill anything. It's basically a living organism just hanging out on the tree. And this is a great example of symbiosis. So we've got two distinct, different life organisms, and they're existing there together. The lichen there is going to receive nothing from the host surface. They're just hanging out. They're not taking any kind of moisture, no nutrients. They're just using it as a support system to grow on. And the lichen that's on thin bark trees like birch or thin bark maples is actually a sign of good air quality. So when you see it, it's actually a good sign. And again, they come in all sorts of colors and shapes. And then we found a variety of fungi, and there's bacteria living in there too. And they are super important to a forest. They're essential to basic ecosystem processes. Some of them break down fallen wood and litter, and they return the nutrients to the soil. And others actually fix nitrogen in the soil, and they help the plants take up more nutrients. So they are another workhorse in the forest. And as you can see, they grow in all shapes and sizes and are so interesting to look at, in my opinion. These are crustose lichens that grow on trees. And again, the lichen are not taking anything from the tree. They're just hanging out. And they look like they're actually painted on there. And they can grow on rocks and other structures as well. But they're actually really tightly attached. And you can't remove them really, no way to do that. So except the beauty and the interesting pieces of them. And about 75% of the lichen species that are on Earth are actually these crustose lichens. They may be an indicator of poor plant health, but they are not the cause. They sometimes are attached to the trees and the substrates that they grow on, and they're just, or when they're attached there, they're just hanging out and doing their photosynthesis thing. But the fungi might be inside the living tissue of the plant and spores being expressed on the outside. And those fungi that are expressed on the outside of the plant will eventually kill a tree, but it's going to be a very slow, long process. So when you see mushrooms growing at the base of a tree, that again is indicating that there is the mechanism inside the tree growing in the living tissue and just being expressed on the outside with those mushrooms, and that fungi will kill the plant from the inside out. It also can degrade the base of the trees and make them fall in the woods. But these lichen are not actually hurting the trees. And then slime mold. What a fun organism. It's not a fungi. They're officially grouped in the phylum of organisms known as Myxomycota or Cota. They are lumped in with mushrooms because they're more similar to fungi than they are to plants and animals, because they have the characteristically fungi-like reproduction by spores, but they are not made up of hyphae, the strands that form the body of fungi. So they're different. We often see this. It's called dog vomit slime mold there on the right. It comes in with mulch oftentimes, and people are really disturbed by it because it's not there one day and the next day it is, and you think it's something really bad, but it's not doing anything to your plants. It's feeding off of material that's in the mulch and will eventually go away. But in the meantime, one of the interesting facts about slime molds is they can actually move. So if you think it started in one place and ended in another, you're right. It probably did move on its own volition. And it's just feeding, finding good things to eat. And they are eating and decomposing matter. So they're not all that bad. They are a little unsightly. Now, I'm not a mushroom person at all, but some folks did see the beginnings of chanterelle mushrooms growing. And the park ranger told us if we came back after some rain that we would probably see the actual chanterelle mushrooms there on the right. But I did not make it back out there. So I borrowed some pictures, open source pictures from the internet. And the name there, the Latin name there is actually not really true according to what I read. That is a different kind of chanterelle, but this is what we call it here because it doesn't really have a name, the North Carolina chanterelle. And that's that yellow chanterelle that you see on the right. So, and actually the chanterelles that we have in North Carolina may represent more than one species, but it's not clear yet. Now, they are safe to eat, but let me tell you, like I said, I am not a mushroom person, so I'm not advocating for you to go out and think that you're picking these and eating them. Please don't do that. Only eat mushrooms from people that really, really, really know what they're doing. And I don't know how you would qualify somebody like that, but it is a mushroom that's eaten. It can sometimes be bought in a store, but apparently from the real mushroom gatherers, those are poor quality and very expensive mushroom to buy and eat. So I don't know. I think it's probably best to just look at them and not eat them unless you are an expert. They have this, they start really tiny, small. The ones we saw were even smaller than these on the left, but they grow into this vase-like, flowery, irregular shaped cap that you see on the right. And they have a vase-like or trumpet-shaped appearance as they age. And their gills are actually false gills that are exposed rather than shaded by the mushroom cap, which happens on many mushrooms. And you can see those false gills there on the right below the cap. They're a really pretty mushroom, but again, be cautious about eating them. This was one of the most interesting things that I took away from my walk, these fungal rings, and this is on a hickory tree. I had always assumed that these were leftover remnants of some kind of fencing, that in some way this forest had been a field, which really can't be true because you have trees growing up all over. So how could it have been a field? This is actually a ring that is caused by birds that are feeding, woodpeckers or sapsuckers, that actually are very strategic and peck the wood in a circle around the trunk, looking for bugs and things to eat. And then what happens is that wound on the tree from those holes is going to allow a fungus to grow in there, and it causes a ring. And you can see the rings. If it's a good tree and it has good bugs, the birds just make these rings in different parts of the tree. So on this one, there actually were more rings going up and on this one tree. And if you look really closely, and I don't have a close-up of it, but if you look really closely, you can see the holes that the bird's beak made. So I thought this was absolutely fascinating and something new. So it was a takeaway that I learned that day. We also saw Yaupon hollies, and these do have some poisonous toxic qualities in them as well, but it's kind of low. So you could eat the berries and probably not feel good. Again, they're going to have a bitter burning sensation, but so I wouldn't recommend it, but it is something that our wildlife eats. And it's a fast growing evergreen shrub, and it is in the holly family. It's native to Eastern U.S. and found in North Carolina. We see a lot of these on the coast and also in woodlands and shrub thickets. And the leaves were once used for a ceremonial tea. And if you consume them, a lot of this tea, then it will cause a cleansing, and therefore its Latin name, vomitoria. It grows really big. It can get usually 10 to 20 feet tall, but can grow up to 30 feet in some areas. It's deciduous, and it has to have separate male and female plants to achieve the bright red berries. So if you're going to have it in your landscape, you need to make sure you've got both a male and a female plant if you want berries. And that's one of the most beautiful things about it. So make sure you get both. We also happened upon boneset, and this is a large herbaceous clump-forming perennial, and it has small white flowers that appear in late summer and into fall. It, again, wants medium to wet soils with a consistent water source, and it likes full sun, will tolerate some partial shade, and sometimes it'll do well in sandy or clay soils. Historically, it was used as a medicinal herb for flu and fevers, cold, and a variety of other maladies. But some people claim that it was also used for either healing broken bones or used as a treatment in a flu that was called breakbone fever. So that's where it got its name, bone set. But all parts of this plant are quite toxic and bitter. So that would be a medicine that would not be a lot of fun to take. So we did happen upon some insects, and this is an imperial moth, and I would have completely missed it had someone else not seen it. As you can see, this moth camouflages itself well there on the trunk of the tree. And it's a large moth, has some yellow on it, some spots and lines and splotches with light brown and dark brown. And this is interesting, I think. They're classified in a section of the giant silkworm family that are called royal moths. So there are a bunch of these that are in the royal moth family. And their life cycle is really interesting. In the spring, in late spring, they emerge from the soil and they mate, and the females lay hundreds of eggs on trees. And the trees that they prefer would be pines, oaks, maples, sassafras, and sweet gum. So they lay the eggs, and when the young are fully grown, they dig into the soil and spend the winter into the soil. Or in the soil. And then the moths emerge in the spring again after they pupated in the soil. And so it would seem that if the mother moths are laying hundreds of eggs, why don't we see more of these? Well, one of the problems is they're delicious for birds. I don't know if humans eat them or not, but the caterpillars are a yummy treat for birds, so a lot of them get eaten. And they're also really exposed to prey when they hatch and they're out there eating the leaves. So they're a ready target for all those predators. And then I didn't know this, but caterpillars apparently have a lot of parasites and diseases. So out of the hundreds of eggs that a mother moth will lay, they're lucky if they have 2 that actually grow to adulthood. And again, they eat lots of different tree leaves that are native to North Carolina. And they're very susceptible to pesticides. So if you see them, try to take care of them because there aren't that many out there. Another insect that we saw was the red spotted purple, and it's a beautiful forest butterfly that you can often see. It's black with blue or green scaling, and it has orange or red marks on the tips of its wings. And you don't actually see those in this picture, but oftentimes people think these are swallowtails, but if you'll note, they don't have tails, so they are not, in fact, swallowtails. And their host plants are the Carolina willow aspens, poplars, cottonwoods, hawthorn, birches, black oak, and serviceberry. And they also feed on fungi. So this is the reason that you often find them in the forests of North Carolina, because all the good things that they like to eat are found there. This is not a tree. My pages are out of order. This is the Lowbush Blueberry, and it grows wild in the forests of North Carolina. We have 2 varieties of blueberries that are native to North Carolina, the high bush, which are the ones that we typically see, the 4 feet, 6 feet tall blueberry bushes that we pick from, and then these low bush. The low bush have smaller berries, and they tend to be sweeter, so people like to use these in jams and jellies. And again, they're a great source of food for wildlife. And you can grow them in your own woodland landscape with acidic soils that, again, are moist, and they want full sun to partial shade. But if the more sun they have, the more blooms that they have, and the showier their fall foliage is going to be. This is the sourwood tree, and it's a small tree. It only grows 20 to 30 feet high, and it's native to North Carolina, and we have them all over our state. And they have laurel-like alternate leaves that are actually sour to taste, so thus the name. They have salicylic acid in them. And one of the nice things about the sourwoods is they're one of the first trees to change color in the fall. And look at that brilliant red color. A nice tree to have. We also happened upon a cranefly orchid. And this is a perennial woodland orchid that's native to the U.S. and found in all sorts of areas in North Carolina. And in autumn, a single oval leaf emerges and stays there through the spring, and then it disappears. So I didn't actually see the leaves. That's what you see over here on the left. But then in July to September, a 1 to 2 foot flower stalk emerges and has these irregularly shaped purplish brown to copper orchid blooms. And you can see those on the right. And there are moths that pollinate them. So the shape of the flower actually helps that moth. And they are connected to one another by a series of combs. We also ran across fireweed, and it gets its name because it's the first plant that usually repopulates burned woodland, and it flourishes on burned over ground, so thus the name fireweed. It's in the daisy family, and we often find it on roadsides and ditches and the shores of lakes and rivers. It grows in clumps with multiple stems, and it can grow really quickly and grow up to 8 to 10 feet. So that's a big one as well. Then our gum trees, our black gum, the black tupelo is a native deciduous tree of North Carolina, and it's known for its beautiful fall colors. It turns a scarlet red, and its leaves also change really early. One of the things that the ranger pointed out were the leaves that you see there on the right often have a bacteria on them by the end of the summer, and that's what those spots are. It doesn't hurt the tree. It's just a natural progression. The bacteria is living there, and the next year the leaves are going to come out. It doesn't harm the tree and keep growing. It's a really, really tall tree, 50 to 80 feet tall, and it is adaptive to all sorts of soil and will take drought, some bad soil. But if you have it in your home landscape, it can grow faster and bigger with more moisture and better soil. The sweet gum, and if you're like me, you have stories of sweet gums from growing up. It's a large, valuable forest trees, and Michael Durr actually said that every home landscaper would have this tree if it weren't for its fruit. It's a woody, spiny ball that hurts a lot to step on, and I tell you that from personal experience. And my husband hates them because they drop those gumballs all over the yard. The crushed leaves smell really sweet, and it has a beautiful foliage in the fall as well. Milkweed. This is if you do any kind of pollinator gardening, you probably have some milkweed. This is the common milkweed that you can find in the forest, and it has its name milkweed because it has a really sappy, creamy discharge if you break the stems. So it is a plant that the butterflies and other pollinators love, and it's nice that it's there in the woodland. So if you want to take a hike, where do you go? There are all sorts of wonderful places here in the Triangle area. And these 3 websites that I note here, Urban Outdoors, All Trails, and Hiking Project. The nice thing about these websites is you can look for hikes that would accommodate the hike that you want. So you can look at them for elevation, you can look at them for length, you can look at them for ease. So these are nice places to look for a particular hike. But Blake mentioned Umstead. They have all sorts of trails. And the nice thing about all of these places is once you get there, if you don't know anything, they're going to have some sort of board that tells you what the hikes are, how long they would be. So you don't have to start out on something and then realize 10 miles in that you bit off a lot more than you can chew. So you've got Umstead nearby. We've got all sorts of state parks and county parks that you can go to. There's Lake Crabtree. There's the Eno. we have a wealth of outdoors for you to enjoy. So again, I encourage you to go out and take a look. And one of the nice things about a hike, if you don't find lots of different places to go, if you have one or two places that you typically hike, pretty much every time you go into the woods, it's going to be a different hike because different things are going to be in season. Are going to be blooming. Your plants are going to have different stages. You're going to have different birds and different insects out. So there's lots of newness. And I know some people hike for the exercise and get out there and just zoom. But if you take it slow and look, one of the fun things to do is to look under rocks. You're going to find lots of really interesting things to see and explore. You'll notice that I didn't have any wildlife and no animal pictures. We were there in late August in the middle of the day, so there wasn't a lot to see. And oftentimes we don't want to encounter wildlife in the woods because this is their home. We don't want to scare them. We probably do. Our noise and activity is going to keep them away. But also, if there are animals that are dangerous to us, we want to stay away from them and not have encounters. So this is some information about the Extension Master Gardeners. We have an office located out on Cary Drive, and we have Master Gardener volunteers that are there Monday through Friday, manning the phones and can answer gardening questions for you. We'd love to do that for you. We are literally an extension of NC State and North Carolina A&T, developed to give you information, communicate the research-based information that these universities are doing. We make it so that you can understand it and we can understand it and give you more information. So call us or you can email us with any kind of gardening questions that you have. And before I end my slideshow, I had to add 2 slides of pictures that I did not take, but these are 2 pictures from the Wildlife Photographer of the Year competition that London's Natural History Museum has every year. And I just thought they were beautiful pictures. This one is the winner of the invertebrates category, and it's bees in South Texas. And I thought I'd put it in here because bees are just amazing. I don't know exactly what they're doing all balled up together like that. But 70% of our bee species nest underground. So it's really important more than ever that we protect their habitats and leave natural soils undisturbed so that they can nest and bear their young and thrive. And we all have heard that bee populations are under stress and slowly going away. So we need to do everything we can to protect them. But I think that's a really cool picture. Maybe it's a soccer match or rugby, I guess. And they're all going after the ball. And this one, wow, this is the winner of the amphibians and reptile category. And this is a bat snatcher snake, a Contimo. And this was taken in Mexico. And at this particular cave at sundown, the bats fly out. And it's called the Cave of Hanging Snakes because the snakes are not stupid. They know the bats are going to be leaving. So they actually hang down from the roof of the cave and grab the bats while they're actually flying. So that is some skill. And this is a snake that has part of his dinner. I don't know how many bats he would eat in an evening, but there you go. And he's going to get all of that bat inside somehow or another. So I'll stop my screen sharing and I will see if there are questions, if I can answer them, but I am not an expert in this topic. I did it because I love ferns and wanted to be outside, and I learned a lot and learned even more when I was researching for the presentation, but I am by no means an expert. If you have a question I can't answer, I could research it and get back with you.
Yeah, and anybody, you are free to unmute yourself and ask Leah questions directly, or you can drop them in the chat and she can answer them for you there.
I have a question. Sally Abbas from Cary. There is a type of bush that has a fairly narrow leaf. It's a green, medium, dark green crispy leaf, that when you crush it in your hands, it just smells like aftershave or something very, very nice and pleasant. I'm looking for the name of that.
Ooh, see, stump the speaker. I don't know. Someone has said perhaps wax myrtle. Does anybody else? Because we've got a wealth of knowledge here. Does anybody else have an idea?
I don't know.
Great.
I think I ought to bring in a leaf or two to one of the folks there at Extension.
Yeah. We'd be happy to try and figure it out, but I don't know. But yeah, if you have plant material that you want to bring in for us to look at or pictures, you could email pictures to us as well. But like I said, we are in the office Monday through Friday. We take a break for lunch, I think from 12 to 1, but otherwise there are folks in there.
It's a common plant. I see them in a lot of places. They're along some of the greenways and so on. I just love the fragrance. So I always grab a leaf and sniff it.
And can you describe it's the bush again?
It's usually maybe 4 to 5 feet tall, I suppose. Does not seem to have flowers on it.
Okay, no flowers. If you want to drop your email in the chat, I'll be glad to do some research and see if I can figure that out.
Okay. Thank you for that question, Sally. Are there any other questions?
I just discovered, oops. I just discovered this that got eaten in my driveway, and I wondered if anybody might know what kind of bird it was. I don't recognize those feathers.
Oh.
Do we have any birders in the crowd?
Sharon Fortner's saying a northern flicker.
Huh.
I'd have to take her word for that. I know absolutely nothing about birds.
I was just hoping maybe somebody did. I found it right before this began, so I haven't had a time to look at it. That would give me some place to start.
Oh, yeah.
Meadowlark. A meadowlark is a large bird with yellow feathers or yellow and other color feathers.
I don't have any yellow feathers. They're all, the shafts are yellow and they have a little bit of yellow on them, but I have no solid yellow feathers.
No, this looks like a mixture, but that's what I think a meadowlark has.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, and Sharon's saying that the flicker is the only bird with a yellow shaft, so perhaps that is what
it has yellow shafts. They're very distinctive.
Oh, well, then sounds like that's what it is. But I would encourage you to look it up and see, and then maybe you can find the bird out there. What is that?
I went outside and got a little bit of wax myrtle, so that you're.
That could be it. That's a similar leaf to what I'm talking about.
Little tiny berries are starting. I don't know whether you can see them.
Yeah.
But, it is a great smeller.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's probably it then. Thank you. One comment I wanted to make to the group that I find interesting. Years ago, we found some big fist-sized puffballs in our yard, and I called Larry Grand, who's a mycologist at NC State, to identify them because I was just curious about them. He says, "Oh, yeah, those are wonderful to eat." Now, that surprised me. And he said, just when they're firm, before they go to the gray dust stage, slice them up, cook them in olive oil, put some Parmesan cheese on them, and they're really good. And he also told me that if you can identify it as a puffball, and it's easy to identify a puffball. They don't have a stem like a mushroom does. That they're all edible. So since that time, I have found and eaten a number of puffballs.
Wow. That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Sally.
I also want to mention that a lot of our state and county parks do guided walks in their particular forests or woodlands. So I think those are great to learn a little bit more. And these are folks that are out there and know what's in their landscape there. And it's a great way to learn more and help you. And then you can go back on your own and discover more.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay. I'm going to take that silence as, Leah, you did an amazing job, and we're so grateful for everything you shared with us today.
So happy to be here.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you so much, Leah, for doing this talk. I definitely learned a lot, that the fungal ring around the tree, I'd seen those so many times, had no idea what was going on. Yep. So I'm just grateful you were here to share your knowledge with us. So, and I'd also like to thank every single one of you out there in the Zoom for joining us for this presentation. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got a lot out of it. I don't believe we have any Master Gardener lectures lined up for 2023 just yet, but we're still getting our programming sorted for next year. So hopefully we'll be able to get some of you to come in and talk for us again next year. But thanks again for joining us, and just be on the lookout for all the other wonderful events we've got going on at the JCRA. Yep. Y'all have a good one. Take care.
Bye, everybody.